The senses that you use in a very real manner create the environment that you perceive. Your physical senses necessitate the perception of a three-dimensional reality. Consciousness is equipped with inner perceptors, however. These are inherent within all consciousness, regardless of its development. These perceptors operate quite independently from those that might be assumed when a given consciousness adopts a specialized form, such as a physical body, in order to operate in a particular system. Each reader, therefore, had inner senses, and to some extent uses them constantly, though he is not aware of doing so at an egotistical level. Now we use the inner senses quite freely and consciously. If you were to do so, then you would perceive the same kind of environment in which I have my existence. You would see an uncamouflaged situation in which events and form were free and not stuck in a jelly-like mold of time. You could see, for example, your present living room not only as a conglomeration of permanent appearing furniture, but switch your focus and see the immense and constant dance of molecules and other particles that compose the various objects. You can see a phosphorescent-like glow, the aura of electromagnetic structures that compose the molecules themselves. You could, if you wished, condense your consciousness until it was small enough to travel through a single molecule, and from the molecule's own world, look out and survey the universe of the room and the gigantic galaxy of interrelated, ever-moving, star-like shapes. Now, all of these possibilities represent a legitimate reality. Yours is no more legitimate than any other, but it is the only one that you perceive. Using the inner senses, we become conscious creators, co-creators. But you are unconscious co-creators, whether you know it or not. If our environment seems unstructured to you, it is only because you do not understand the true nature of order, which has nothing to do with permanent form, but only appears to have form from your perspective. There is no 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 9 o'clock in the evening in my environment. By this I mean that I'm not restricted to a time sequence. There's nothing preventing me from experiencing such sequences if I choose. We experience time, or what you would call its equivalent nature, in terms of intensities of experience, a psychological time with its own peaks and valleys. This is somewhat similar to your own emotional feelings when time seems speeded up or slowed down, but it is vastly different in important ways. Our psychological time could be compared in terms of environment to the walls of a room. But in our case, the walls will be constantly changing in color, size, height, depth, and width. Our psychological structures are different, practically speaking, in that we consciously utilize a multi-dimensional psychological reality that you inherently possess, but are unfamiliar with at an egotistical level. It is natural then that our environment would have multi-dimensional qualities that the physical senses would never perceive. Now, I project a portion of my reality as I dictate this book to an undifferentiated level between systems that is relatively clear of camouflage. It is an inactive area, comparatively speaking. If you were thinking in terms of physical reality, then this area could be likened to one immediately above the atmosphere of your Earth. However, I'm speaking of psychological and psychic atmospheres, and this area is sufficiently distant from Rupert's physically oriented self so that communications can be relatively understood. It is also in a way distant from my own environment, for in my own environment I would have some difficulties in relating information in physically oriented terms. You must understand that by distance, I do not refer to space. Creation and perception are far more intimately connected than any of your scientists realize. It is quite true that your physical senses create the reality that they perceive. A tree is something far different to a microbe, a bird, an insect, and a man who stands beneath it. I am not saying that the tree only appears to be different. It is different. You perceive its reality through one set of highly specialized senses. This does not mean that its reality exists in that form in any more basic way than it exists in the form perceived by the microbe, insect, or bird. You cannot perceive the quite valid reality of that tree in any context but your own. This applies to anything within the physical system that you know. It is not that physical reality is false. It is that the physical picture is simply one of an infinite number of ways of perceiving the various guises through which consciousness expresses itself. The physical senses force you to translate experience into physical perceptions. The inner senses open up your range of perception, allow you to interpret experience in a far freer manner, and to create new forms and new channels through which you or any consciousness can know itself.